There are two commodities in life that you cannot buy: your health and your reputation. Reputation building is exactly what we will focus on in this podcast. Crises, lawsuits, and media attacks can all cause significant damage to your life and to your business. But as Winston Churchill famously said, never let a good crisis go to waste. In this podcast, we will show you how to protect, rebuild, and even boost your reputation when the storm hits. Because sometimes the worst day of your career might just be making of your legacy. My name is Monika Bickauskaite-Aleliune, and this is my Best Crisis podcast. Today on our podcast, we have Graham Atkins. Graham is a partner at Atkins Dello and is a leading libel, privacy, and reputation management lawyer with over 30 years of experience. During his career, Graham has represented governments, cabinet ministers, political parties, presidents, and prime ministers, including Tony Blair, Donald Trump, and Boris Johnson. Our guest has also advised leaders in sports and entertainment, including Kate Beckinsale and Naomi Campbell. He has helped many known brands to protect themselves from attacks and media threats. Graham, welcome to our podcast. Thank you so much for coming today. It is a pleasure to have you. I know that you don't do media very often, so it's truly an honor to have you here. And because of that, the audience will learn a lot from you because they haven't heard much in the media. So thank you so much, and I appreciate your time.
It's a pleasure. It's good to be here.
So to begin the podcast, I would like to ask you something that will help us understand what is it that you truly do. And I want to ask you, what is the first thing that you do when a client calls and they're in crisis? It can be a lawsuit, a media threat, or reputation threat. What is the first thing to do?
Well, the first thing is to try to make sure that you're properly briefed. And that can be on anything, as you say. You have to sometimes ask the client some uncomfortable questions, but it's obviously essential. You would think it's essential anyway, to make sure that you're on top of the whole situation. It sometimes turns out down the line that the client hasn't always been entirely open with you at the start, but that happens less and less. I think that the clients generally realize you have to have a strategy. You have to sometimes instruct specialist PR or litigation PR companies to help you, sometimes polling companies, sometimes, depending on the situation, it could be anything. But above all, it's important to have the best professional team around you that you can. Obviously, it's important as well to analyse your opponent, if there is one, and to work out your strategy from there. Sometimes you'll know how they operate, you'll know sometimes who their lawyers may be, and whether they're going to fight a situation, whether they're happy to settle, and so on and so forth. I often find that working for substantial clients with the support of other professionals around is the way to give the best possible advice to them. It may be in the political arena, it may be in other situations. There's critical points during any litigation or any crisis when, of course, you want to ensure the best outcome for the clients. One of the most satisfying parts of my role is to advise on a huge variety of different matters for all types of clients, whether they're individuals involved in a privacy dispute, a matrimonial battle, or whether something's about to be published or has been published. It could be a big business with a huge scandal about to break. Anyone in our business, we all appreciate the breadth and quality of advice that's required for the client. And it's generally topical and interesting and important.
So you mentioned that you work with a lot of different clients, and in fact, you work with a lot of powerful and famous clients. So my question would be, how do you establish trust with these people? Because if they're under attack, probably it's hard for them to trust others. And how do you manage, the legal risks? How do you explain it to them? What's at stake?
Well, managing risk has, of course, become more complicated with the proliferation of online and fake news and cancel culture. The landscape has generally become much more inhospitable. Almost all of my work has come from word-of-mouth recommendations to try to get the best results that I can and work well with the clients, and that helps to establish trust and build confidence because you're being recommended by someone who you'll have done good work for and probably won a case.
So when you work with these high-level and high-profile clients, how do you navigate the tensions between the legal risk and the public perception?
Well, it's always very difficult, and if you don't take a holistic view of these crises, you won't be able to represent your client's best interests. We're often called in when a media or PR strategy has failed to achieve the desired results, and then the legal options are required to assist. Often a government will be dealing with local or national or international matters, and you have to give tailored advice for any type of situation. Sometimes that means improving the knowledge of the electorate. Sometimes you're dealing with a government at war, and that can include a hybrid war with the media. There's always significant advice that's required, and it's very important that you get that right. The media coverage for politicians or political parties or government, it's hard to achieve the best coverage because sometimes your media is intrinsically biased or partisan, or you may have foreign governments, foreign media, political opponents at home or abroad are trying to damage the client. The stakes are always very high, which is stressful, but ultimately when you get the right result, very rewarding.
Could you also walk us through a case where managing the optics was as important as managing the actual legal case?
Well, some of the most interesting work that I've undertaken is protecting politicians or political parties from adverse media in the run-up to either leadership elections or general elections. That can involve getting intelligence from third parties, sometimes attacking an opponent's political strategy, or most often protecting individuals from damaging, defamatory or private stories hitting the press just at the wrong time in advance of the election. In this jurisdiction, the press is still absolutely crucial, not just for individuals, corporations or governments, but for those in charge. The press is enormously powerful, and although politicians and political parties and governments have been criticised for having an overly close relationship with the media, it's more and more a fact of life. In these situations, I've often found myself advising on the bigger picture, the optics, as you mentioned, as much as protecting reputations or repairing the damage done after the fact.
So when we are talking about privacy and optics, in the UK, the legal system is a bit different from other countries, and that is because we have the law of super injunction. And I think a lot of people don't even know about this law or have never used it. I wanted to ask your opinion about this law. How is this law working, and have you used it? Do you want to comment a bit more about how it works?
Yes, I mean, a client will often want to restrain publication or broadcast of private and confidential information. And in this case, they can apply to court for an injunction. The parties involved can be named, but not the details or the facts of the matter. A super injunction can be applied for in certain very limited circumstances, and that prevents the media from publishing anything about the existence of the injunction itself. The media often want to uncover these facts and find out more about super injunctions, and they often cite freedom of speech arguments. Sometimes the injunctions can be mentioned in other jurisdictions or by members of Parliament in the House of Commons, which can reveal details and make the injunction ineffective and pointless. And the court generally won't then continue to allow these injunctions to remain in force if that occurs. There are arguments that politicians shouldn't interfere with court orders in this way, but there's a risk of this happening with very high-profile cases.
From your experience, what are the most avoidable mistakes that high net worth individuals, governments, or businesses tend to do in reputation management? And is there a way to avoid them?
Well, I do find sometimes that the most high-profile and successful people in both personal and professional lives can find it difficult to listen to the advice, and often they take advice from different people, different professionals, and sometimes they don't listen, and we are then asked to solve the problem. And generally, I would say that preparation in all of these circumstances is key, and without a good team of advisors around you, you can't prepare in advance for the situation that may occur.
Yeah. We definitely have also experienced in our work that sometimes clients don't want to listen to you. However, when you have the best team, as you mentioned before, you can definitely expect the best results. And hopefully, in the future, the clients will understand the value of listening, and we'll have easier times advising them.
Absolutely.
So throughout your career, you have worked with multiple governments, including the UK and the US. Importantly, and I think interestingly for everybody else, you have worked with President Donald Trump of the United States. So from our work with our clients and consulting them, we noticed that a lot of clients are a bit confused about his policies. They don't really understand the current administration, and because of that, it's very interesting to ask you, since you worked with him, about his thinking perhaps. And what I wanted to ask is, do you think that he would change something in the US legal system, the new administration would change something, or not really? And also, how should the businesses position themselves to be able to function in this new political environment that we all live in?
Well, yes, I've been in the very fortunate position of being called upon to advise a number of members of parliament, cabinet ministers, presidents and prime ministers during my career. And it's always been a great honour, and I'm extremely grateful for that. One thing that stands out for me, and you won't read this in the media, is that the overwhelming majority of those in power and who achieve the highest rank in politics are often work incredibly hard in very difficult circumstances to try to get the best outcome for their country, not just working for themselves, not purely self-interested. I did work for President Trump in a libel action which was brought against him in this jurisdiction in England. The case against him was weak, and the judge decided on our application that the case should be struck out against the president. He was very pleased with the outcome. I've also advised President Poroshenko of Ukraine in a defamation action against the BBC, and I acted for Tony Blair and his family for many years. I've also acted for Boris Johnson, and it's very interesting. It's always different, and I'm very grateful to have been able to work on those cases. In terms of political dynamics here and abroad, you obviously have to take into account legal and regulatory frameworks. The current geopolitical climate is complex and quite troubling. Alongside that, we have fast-paced change in technology, which can have a damaging impact. And at this moment in time, it's particularly difficult for businesses and indeed governments to deal with fast-paced change in terms of tariffs and the other executive orders President Trump is implementing. In short, a very challenging time all round.
You definitely worked with a lot of personalities and politicians. And coming back to President Trump, do you think there is a secret recipe for success for having a very strong working relationship with the current administration?
Well, I think he's certainly testing everybody within and outside the US at the moment. It goes without saying that navigating national or international politics isn't straightforward, and there's an ever-changing landscape to keep on top of. I would recommend that my clients involve experts in public affairs and government relations to ensure awareness of policy changes, how it may affect the successful adoption of outcomes arising from the decisions taken. We've seen how complicated matters have become in England, in the EU, the Middle East, Russia and Ukraine, as well as in the US and their relationship with China. One can't help but notice that the Trump administration is very commercial, and no doubt in part due to the president's business background. So many tricks of the trade, including negotiating tactics, are of prime importance. The key to this is often not just the strength of your opening hands, but how you play it thereafter.
So when our clients ask, about examples, is there a good example who has good, strong working relationship with Trump? I think that one country comes to mind, and that is Saudi Arabia. We noticed that they had very strong connection and very good relationship from the very beginning of the current administration, but even in the previous administration, They invested a lot into, as you mentioned, important factor, public affairs, and I think they managed to capture the audience in the US, but also the administration's attention. So a lot of times, when we're asked by a country client, what is a good example to follow when building relationship with Trump, we think that Saudi Arabia is a good one. So just wanted to also mention that for the audience members that might be interested in this.
Yes.
So now we are moving away from the political challenges because we do live in very turbulent times. So I wanted to ask you, what other types of challenges businesses will face in the next year, and where should they invest regarding their reputation management and reputation building?
Well, it's an interesting question. I mean, there is a great deal of economic uncertainty at the moment, as well as increases in national debt, problems with inflation and interest rates, very volatile financial markets, and so on. And businesses have to adapt and continuously monitor the situation. And the acceleration in the digital world will continue to have an impact, whether in terms of technology, AI, blockchain, or related issues, for example. The threats to business from fake news and the increasing frequency and sophistication of cyber attacks will also play a role. The economic outlook is relatively gloomy, with the possibility of a global recession. As well as challenges in recruiting and retaining talent, companies will have to manage costs effectively, plan for volatile financial markets, and be flexible and strategic to maintain profitability. Brand reputation is also vitally important. That includes spending time and money in protecting and enhancing your reputation, always bearing in mind that planning comprehensively for the future, including with a plan for bad press or reputational attacks, is crucial. Clients have to invest in identifying threats from online or other sources, using intelligence input and strategic experts to be ready for every eventuality. It's common for businesses to have a multifaceted approach, and the better prepared have media strategy and communications advisors, as well as litigation, PR and lawyers to help them achieve their aims.
So what types of attacks do you usually see as the most common? Are there common attacks, or are they always different? And do you think there's a difference in different jurisdictions, for example, Europe, US, and the Middle East?
Well, I think with the advent of AI and the proliferation of social media, I see a significant rise in reputational attacks online, where many of the culprits either hide their identities or basically have nothing to lose if they're found to be defaming individuals or indeed companies. There's a proliferation as well of fake news articles, which if used cleverly, and they often are, will damage the reputation of an individual or a company. A good or bad story can now not only spread globally within a matter of minutes, but the opportunities to prevent it or to repair the damage after it's happened has made our job a lot more difficult than it was previously. And also follows that if you don't get a very public correction or apology, then the people who may have seen the original piece or broadcast will never see the correction, and it will remain in their minds after that. The laws in relation to libel and the manner in which one can restore one's reputation varies across the different jurisdictions, and we're often retained to advise clients in this and other jurisdictions, where we can also bring on board local counsel to assist. In addition, we sometimes have foreign-based companies or US law firms or individuals who haven't got the experience in specialist libel and reputation matters in this jurisdiction to help them through. I've also noted over the years that the reaction to a defamatory comment or the damage to people's reputation varies across the world. Certain cultures will take a BBC article more seriously than they will a local article. It makes our role generally more challenging, and we also have to take into account the cancel culture, which now extends beyond just online, and you can find that in Middle East public figures who fail to respect the Islamic values or local customs. It can lead to severe reputational problems which are very hard to reverse. I've also advised on the media impact of very high profile litigation or disputes that are occurring in the courts here, ensuring that the client's protected in the press and online while the dispute is ongoing. So I work alongside Magic Circle or US law firms involved in very substantial litigation to ensure that the media and the way that it's picked up is in line with their expectations.
So you mentioned the proliferation of fake news, and actually with our clients, we also have noticed that these days we see a lot of fake websites come up online that pose, as investigative websites. However, when you look at the actual website and the people don't really exist. It's fake names. The information is false. It's purely defamation. However, you cannot really trace who did that, who's behind this attack. And when you try to take it down, it's simply not possible because you cannot reach out to this website and say, listen, this is wrong, this is not correct information. So my question to you would be, what's the role of search engines such as Google? Is it possible to, contact Google and prove that this is wrong information, this is false information, and can they take it down, or are we lost in this world of limitless internet?
Well, I certainly think it's got more difficult. There are ways to approach Google or other search engines or Twitter or other social media to try to get defamatory content removed, but it's not straightforward. And as you can imagine, quite often clients will have their attempts to have material removed from online rejected, and it often helps to have specialist lawyers retained to assist with the policies and procedures at different media outlets. Again, sometimes we'll know the lawyers or we'll know the way that they deal with complaints, so that's important to know as well. The most likely complaints to succeed, where they will remove the material, is where they've published obviously damaging and defamatory content, alleging serious criminality or wrongdoing, corruption or fraud. And in those cases, it's preferable to get a court order as well. And if you show Google or others a court order which states that a matter is private and confidential or libelous, the search engine will almost certainly remove the offending material. In those instances, one has to be aware, however, that this may not apply in other jurisdictions. So damaging material can be removed, but then can re-emerge and remain online in other countries. But if I was a client in this sort of situation, there's no doubt you require multi-jurisdictional advice.
So you mentioned the multiple jurisdictions, and sometimes client can take the case to a court in different jurisdictions, for example, in US, Middle East, and UK. And from our clients, we often hear now that the UK system has become a bit complicated, and sometimes the cases can drag on for years or even decades. And we see some cases for 10 years not being resolved. So my question to you would be, why would still the clients want to have their cases tried in the UK? Because a lot of the clients still do. And is UK still, the best legal system, or you think that there are better legal systems to go to?
England's defamation laws have traditionally been more claimant-friendly than other jurisdictions, including the US, where public figures have to prove defamatory statements were made with actual malice. Furthermore, claimants have to prove the allegations made against them are false, which reverses the burden of proof from the English jurisdiction. The courts here have tried to restrict what's known as libel tourism, where claimants are trying to use a more advantageous jurisdiction. If there are numerous publications internationally, a claimant has to prove that this jurisdiction is the most appropriate place to bring a legal action. Indeed, with some enormous libel awards in the US, sometimes running into millions, or hundreds of millions in some cases, some clients are considering taking action there if they can. They have jury trials in the States, and juries have awarded these enormous sums. In most cases, though, it has to be said that claimants don't really have a choice as to which jurisdiction they take action. They have to show they have a connection to this jurisdiction, that this is the best place for it. The courts here have had enough of foreign individuals with publications abroad saying that the very limited publication that you have in this country has affected their reputation, and trying to take action here is not as easy as it used to be.
So we discussed a lot today. Thank you so much for your insights. And at the end, I want to ask probably the most difficult question, because you have a lot of knowledge, but I will ask you to summarize it into one phrase. So if you could have and give one advice for the clients, maybe even before they pick up the phone and call you, what would this advice be? Just your personal motto.
Well, I think that crisis planning is crucial, and it almost goes without saying, but the better prepared an individual, a business, political party or a government can be, the better they're able to tackle adversity, which is never a simple task. Having the best people around you is obviously paramount. And these people will have external advisors, and then they come to you for PR litigation, PR support, and come to me for legal advice. And we can then gather together as a team and make sure we can advise accordingly.
Absolutely. I'm definitely looking forward to potentially working together in the future. And thank you so much for all of your insights. I'm sure that the audience will find this fascinating to hear. You taught us a lot today, and you talked about interesting figures you worked with. I think not everybody has the pleasure to say that they have worked with these great personalities. And I'm sure that they were pleased with your work, and I'm wishing you the best with future cases. Hopefully you're there, to go and win them for the clients. So thank you so much, and appreciate your time.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.